Give me a 3, 2, 1. Hello, I'm Pastor Horace Douty, Lexington, Virginia, and each week I bring you a local history lesson, and I quote from my own 2 volumes of local history entitled History Lessons from a Country Church. These books, if you're interested in purchasing, they are available in Lexington, both at Downtown Books and at the Bookery. Volume 1 and Volume 2. I am quoting today from Volume 1. I encourage you to subscribe to Horace Douty, D-O-U-T-Y, YouTube, and also share these videos with your family and your friends. I really appreciate your support. Today, the title of the history lesson is Cruising Down the River. Today, here in Rockbridge County, we're blessed with such beautiful roads that our minds cannot conceive the conditions faced by the early settlers. Until the late 1750s, there were very few roads, so every possession was brought in on a pack horse or carried on the back of individuals. And when furniture was required, somebody had to make it by hand using an axe. The home itself was a product of this same kind of labor, and yet these Scot-Irish immigrants and Germans survived on harsh frontiers because they enjoyed and craved liberty. By the time of the American Revolution, it was clear that the settlers were here to stay. They had learned how to provide for themselves and could do so with surplus left over, and that surplus of crops and animals and minerals could be sold, but where? During the early years, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania was the only answer. It was where these people had come through, and it was their gateway to the world. How did they transport hogs and cattle from Rockbridge to Philadelphia? By foot, through the woods and down the great Indian path that quickly turned into the Great Wagon Road. It sounds impossible, but they pulled it off, adding to the list of historical achievements. They sold their products in Philadelphia. Wheels eventually came to Rockbridge, but wheels require roads, or at least wide paths. Building roads in the forest is extremely difficult. Our ancestors did it only when forced to by law. In these back parts of Virginia, they grumbled, "It's my land and I should be allowed to do with it what I wish." Court records bristle with cases where the pioneer farmer was forced to allow travelers passage through his property, and with petitions where people wanted roads to the mills and the ironworks and the meeting houses. Our transportation system in this valley took a giant step forward during the mid-1800s when the canal was built that opened Rockbridge to eastern Virginia and to the world. It was called the Virginia North River Navigation Company. And between Lexington and Glasgow, Virginia, 11 dams were built, as well as 14 boat locks on what is now the Maury River. Society was desperate for easier travel and seemed willing to pay the cost. The price reached $30,000 a mile back in those days, and our ancestors did not relent. We are speaking of Rockbridge County, where the frugal Scot-Irish did not easily part with their money. But the road to Philadelphia was desperately needed, a way to get animals and farm products and minerals to the world market. The extraordinary project was complete with the canal in operation by 1861, from Richmond to Lexington. How I wish I could have witnessed the first boat making its way into the port of Lexington, Virginia. It's one of the most significant events in this area's history, and it must have been wondrous to behold. Consider this: a strong peddler could probably carry 50 pounds into Rockbridge on his back. The average pack horse load was 200 pounds. A good wagon could maybe haul as much as 2,000 pounds if he had a path, a road. And in sharp contrast, boats suddenly were moving smoothly in and out of little Lexington, easily transporting 120,000 pounds each. At last, the potential for commerce in our mountain valley was virtually unlimited. Another impossible dream had come true. Until the canal, it was not easy to get into this area. Our history archives contain countless letters written by people who came here on bone-rattling stagecoaches. The writers all agree Lexington was difficult to reach. Severe discomfort and danger was faced on every trip, and while ascending the mountains east and west of Lexington, that was laborious, but coming down was terrifying. The wooden coach wheels were ironclad, the path was riddled with rocks, and brakes weren't dependable. Water travel offered something altogether different. It was quiet, it was gentle. Passengers had sleeping quarters on boats that were 100 feet and more long. They were served hot meals and encountered no time-wasting stopovers. And a $4 ticket bought in Lexington could take you through the scenic countryside to Richmond in 48 hours of comfort. The only sound other than birds singing was the boatman's deep horn alerting the lock keeper ahead to be up and to be ready, whether day or night. While traveling on the water, darkness was not an issue. When General Robert E. Lee came to Lexington to take charge of the struggling little college, he rode his horse Traveler. His family came by boat, and he met them down at the wharf early on December 2, 1865. Could his badly crippled wife ever have come to Lexington without the canal? Probably not. Beechinbrook is what that area was called, where the dock stood at East Lexington. General Lee may have smiled at the advertisement that appeared in Lexington's newspaper, quote, "Beechinbrook flour will do more to promote family harmony than anything we know of." What else, besides passengers, went cruising down the river? The Lexington newspaper, which was then called the Lexington Gazette, proudly gave a list of products: iron ore, whiskey, brandy, cider, apples, butter, eggs, potatoes, turnips, lime, marble, hemp, leather, wool, beef, pork, mutton, venison, rye, corn, oats, lard, buckwheat, tobacco, hay, vinegar, bark, cement, loop poles, fence posts, staves, shingles, plank, scantling, and more. With the canal, farmers could ship their wheat and their flour to Richmond, one of the two largest milling cities in the United States. Rockbridge flour was shipped all over the world. Local citizens went down to Beechinbrook, which is now Jordan's Point, and they found they could purchase off the boats virtually anything offered on the world market, right there on the river in Lexington, Virginia. Jordan's Point became a beehive of industrial activity. Factories, foundries, mills, warehouses, shops, and stores were all there on the water. There were the shops that would eventually be moved uptown to the Lexington that we know today. In 1862, William Jordan ran an ad, "Pork wanted." In finer print, he called for farmers to bring him 20,000 pounds of pork. That's 10 tons. Such huge numbers were undreamed of in pre-canal days. Railroads came in the 1880s. They proved to be less expensive and more practical than the lovely canal, which slowly closed down and was eventually wiped out by continuing floods. And although the operation lasted for only 20 years, it had an unprecedented impact on Rockbridge County. All walks of life here were affected, from the average citizen to the wealthiest merchant, from the struggling farmer to the hard-working laborer, from the youngest child to the oldest town elder. The canal opened our valley to the east and therefore to the world. Initial construction provided employment for hundreds of workers. The work was meticulously well done because after a century and more of neglect, beautifully crafted stonework can be found all the way along the Murray from Lexington to the James River. And they are still there. We can only dream of the breathless activity that once upon a time changed Rockbridge forever. Think about the covered bridge, the ice plant, the sawmill, the hat factory. Imagine the music rising from the chartered boat hosting a wedding party. Those were wonderful days for Lexington. It is good to remember and speak of them and to dream of cruising down the river from Beechin Brook to the ocean.